Weren't many Gary Nevilles.
Cool, he said he was mustard in your film.
He did,
on the
he
plate,
did, he
but
did.
I thought he was more of a backup dancer for you.
Yeah, well, you know, Gaz created the space for me. You know, that was unselfish runs, and he made a career out of it because we played together for so many years that he made those runs over and over again. And every now and again, 1 out of 10, I'd give him a ball, but it was very rare.
How important is it to have a partnership like that on the pitch? Because I look at partnerships, everyone thinks like, I don't know, Cole and York or Bergkamp and Thierry, etc. But I put your one with Gary up there as one of the most like important for a team.
It was important for us, and I think I'd like to think it was important for United and important for England as well. You know, because we had such a great understanding. You know, that he knew that if I hadn't run back, which was very rare, I knew that he would be there covering me, and vice versa. You know, I think that was why Gary, you know, understood that even though 99% of the time when he made those runs, he was never going to get the ball, he knew that it was helping the team and helping me. So, you know, it worked both ways.
Did you do it? What was it you done for him? Because he always talks about what he done for you, and he's quite like, he puts himself down a little bit.
Well, I think I made him famous with making him my best man. Apart from that, no, I'm only joking. No, I think that we were just a great partnership. I think that obviously me being an East End boy moving to Manchester, you know, I needed solid friends. You know, I needed solid friends and solid teammates, and he was that person. You know, he really set the bar of professionalism, you know, and hard work. And I was lucky that I was like that. You know, I wanted to have that hard work. I wanted to have that professionalism. But I suppose it's easy to stray away from that. Whereas with Gary, because he was one of my closest friends, because I knew what I had to do to be a professional at United and stay at United, I knew I had to follow someone like that.
He must have pissed you off though, sometimes. Because he does talk so much, doesn't he? Like,
yeah, but he's always talked so much. He's always talked so much, and now he's doing it every day on TV, and everyone's seeing it. But do you know what? He's been unbelievable. For you know, he always talks about it. For a player that, you know, was a United fan through and through, annoyed most other teams that, you know, every time they played against him, but the fact that he is now loved by the whole country and for what he does is brilliant.
I think I used to love it, and I don't know if you did, but you wouldn't have at the time, but I used to love it when I used to see his argue sometimes on the pitch. Yeah. Because it was almost like you need to, in a great teams, you need people
but
that
you need that.
You need
That's
to argue.
What you need someone in your team that's going to pull you and not just say, oh, by the way, you miss your runner. Maybe next time, watch him. You need people like that. You were like that. Keeney was like that. Gaz was like that. You know, but it wasn't just him. We had so many people and players in our team that if you messed up, you're gonna get it. You're gonna get told. And if you don't get told by the players, you get told by the manager. And that's really why we had such a good relationship on and off the field, because we could be honest with each other, you know, and Gaz was always there for me, you know, through difficult times, and vice versa.
It's crazy because I was doing my other podcast with Owen Hargreaves the other day, Rio Presents, on the channel, and he spoke about coming to Man United and realising there's 25 sharks in the dressing room, and they're all feeding, they all want to be fit. But again, I said to that, yes, there are, but you do need that overarching figure to make sure that they cultivate a good working environment.
I think we were lucky though. I think because you know, I suppose saying sharks is I wouldn't say it's the wrong word, but I would just say that, you know, we came into a United team and a club that were hungry for success. You know, you didn't have players outdoing other players just to get in the team. You know, you'd have players. We had a team. We had a real team of players that were supporting each other. That we were a team. Simple as that.
Yeah, and that's what I realised when I first walked in. And obviously, I knew you and the England boys, Gaz and Scholes and that and Butty before. But that's what when I walked in, the first thing I thought is like the togetherness here. Where does that come from? How does that? You were there before me.
It comes from the top.
Yeah.
It comes from the manager. It comes from the manager. It comes from the captain. But we were lucky. Yeah, we had, you know, when I first moved to United, you know, you had players like Brian Robson as captain. You had Steve Bruce. You know, you had Ince. You had Keeney. You know, all of these strong characters. But actually, there was a lot more captains in the team than you realised, and that's really it. All comes from the manager.
You know, the manager, and I think he's such an important aspect of anything that happened at Man United. But I look at all the players that were under him, and they all always talk about the influence that he had on them. What were the influences that rubbed off on you from the manager?
I always looked at the boss as a father figure. You know, I moved up from East London when I was 15 years old, and he was, even though he was Manchester United's manager, it was like my dad, and the kind of relationship that we had was incredible, because he knew when exactly to put his arm around you, but he also knew what player could, you know, take a little bit of a stronger word, or, you know, or needed a little bit less, you know. And I think that's why we had the success at Manchester United that we had. It's why the players wanted to play for him. And really, you know, my relationship with the manager, people always talk about, you know, the difficult times. We didn't have many difficult times, you know, but I think that, you know, the manager understood me and I understood what the manager wanted, but we all respected the manager so much. But he was always there for us no matter what. So much happened in my career, and not all good. You know, in '98, obviously it was a tough time for me, but to get through that, you know, it was even tougher. But it didn't feel tough at the time, because I had the right people around me. I had a manager that looked after me, a team that looked after me, and teammates that every time I stepped out onto the pitch, I knew that they had my back no matter what. So it didn't matter what else was going on and being said about me outside of Manchester United. Didn't really matter, because all I cared about was my teammates and the team.
But when you talk about Manchester United, you've got a couple of players now, a situation maybe with Sancho right now, especially Harry Maguire the last couple of weeks, where people are saying the attention, the criticism, the stick's gone over the top, it's gone too far. I mean, nothing can sort of match what happened there in '98 after that World Cup. You know, so this was going on when we were players. It's not something just new, is it?
No, and I think, you know, a few of us went through it, you know, and it always seemed to be, you know, a United player at the time. You know, obviously I went through it, Phil went through it, you know, a couple of lads went through it over the years, but I think, you know, it's a different time now, and in all honesty, I'm happy where it is now, because people are able to actually pull people into line about saying certain things, because people react different. People can't take it sometimes, and it's, you know, it's a different time. So it was tougher. Manchester United was my escape, you know, because at the end of the day, football was my job, but I'd have done it anyway, even if I weren't being paid to play football. I loved football, so it was an escape. But in all honesty, it was Man United that was my escape from it all, because, like I said, once I was at training, you know, not talking about Keeney too much, you know, because I don't want to embarrass him, but, you know, when you've got someone like Keeney in the team that sets the highest standards, not just at the weekend, but every single day. Every single day there was a standard set. And I always thought that I was, you know, professional, dedicated, but nothing compared to what Keeney was like. Every single day in training, he wanted to win.
We had a good dressing room, Beckhams. No, there was a good dressing room. I always say that. There were some brilliant lads in our dressing room.
It was, but you know, we always talk about the gaffer, you know, setting the right example, but, you know, everyone in our team set that example. And I knew that once I, you know, got back from the World Cup, I knew once I was into that season that I would be protected. And, you know, it showed from literally day one of the first game of the season. I knew, you know, as much stick as I was getting, I didn't care, because I was protected by the team.
Yeah.
Just looking at that now, and obviously we all, you know, we lived it obviously with you. But did you see a psychologist or anybody at that time? Were you speaking to? You weren't at that time. You couldn't. There wasn't a support system in place, was there, in terms of that sort of net?
No, again, you know, and going back on the era that I grew up in, and we all grew up in, you know, and obviously coming from where I was from a working class family, you know, and if I turned around to my dad at the time and said, Dad, I don't feel great today. Can I see a therapist? I need to talk about it. He'd be like, boy, just get on with it. You know, and that's how I was brought up. So no, I didn't see anyone. I felt that I had the right people around me to not see anyone. But I also do think, you know, these days we talk about people being able to talk, and it's a good thing. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I grew up in an era where, you know, my dad would just say, go and get on with it, boy.
So you take it forward 8 years to the 1990 World Cup, the Gascoigne moment, the tears, the emotion, obviously what happened in that tournament.
To be honest, you know, I think the whole nation wept with Gazza on that day. You know, I think we all felt that emotion that he was feeling.
He was brilliant, wanted to be with Gazza. He was just he was infectious around the place.
You know what, he wanted to be loved. It was simple as that with Gazza. You know, obviously I did a couple of different campaigns with him, advertising things, and there was one particular shoot that I was on, and my mum and dad were with me. And my mum and dad they laughed with him, they cried with him, and they came away from it just in love with Gazza. And, you know, you played with him a lot more than I did earlier on. Gazza was one of those people that you just wanted to be around him because his personality was so infectious in so many different ways. That character, you know, that's what makes the game so special.
Tell us about that moment where you were first made England captain. Obviously, I was in and around the sort of squad at the time, but you were unbelievably proud, weren't you? It was a massive moment for you.
It was a massive moment. I just think that as a kid, you always dream of representing your country. When you love football as much as we did, I'd watched the games with my dad, I'd watched the games with my granddad, I'd been to Wembley. You know, all I dreamt of was representing my country. So then, to be given the captain's armband, it was just a huge honour to lead England for the amount of times that I did into different competitions. And your responsibilities change. They change hugely.
There's no hiding places there.
There was no hiding places. You had to deal with politics on the field, off the field, make decisions. And I was making decisions when really I didn't know whether I was making the right decisions or wrong decisions. I asked you and hoped that you got it right.
So I wasn't getting it right. I was going on strike.
You understand? So, you know, the responsibilities came with being England captain. But to be honest, if someone would have turned around to me when I was sat in my dad's living room in 1982 and said, that'll be you one day wearing that captain's armband in a World Cup, I'd never have believed that. I'd always want it, but I'd never would have believed it.
When I look back at my England career, I always thought of it as a roller coaster. Yeah. It was never calm, was it? It was never so... It was just up and down all the time.
It was.
How do you view your England career when you look back at those 115 games? I sometimes think of it as a disappointment because we never won a tournament or we never got to a final. Do you have regrets of any kind?
I don't have any regrets other than not winning something. And yeah, you could look back and say, well, it was disappointing because, you know, over those years we had great players, we had
Why didn't we win? I ask people this who played in that team who weren't part of that team. Why do you think we didn't win the collection of players we had in 2004 and 6 in particular?
Because we weren't good enough on the day. Simple as that. It had nothing to do, because I've heard numerous people come out and say, well, you know, there was cliques and some players didn't talk to other players. I don't care whether players talk to each other whilst they're eating dinner, whilst they're eating lunch, while they're in the change room. The moment you get on that pitch, you don't care whether Stevie G's in a better position than me. I'm going to give him the ball. Simple as that. You're footballers and you're a professional. It's not about cliques. It's not about Liverpool players not liking United players.
We didn't know, did we?
You definitely didn't. I thought they was all right, personally.